Welcome back everyone. So today I'm going to just be sharing with you guys all of my color mixes and the colors that I'm going to be using for this painting. So I will double check the codes and just insert it here in the video because I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm using my Koi watercolor kit. Let me show you guys. It is an international watercolor brand from Shakira Color Products, and I absolutely love this watercolor. Now, if you watch a previous episode on my channel, you will see that I have reconditioned this kit using honey. And now that I've reconditioned it, it really works really beautifully, and I do love the pigment. And I do want to use it. I don't want to lose it. So the newer kit that I've gotten for World Watercolor Month can take a rest for those special paintings. But I do want to use this kit. So this is just the sort of basic kit once again. So I want to run through some of the colors that I've used. And I'm going to insert here the video where I've mixed these colors. There we go. So while I'm mixing on the screen here, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about these colors and why I've mixed them. So if we look at our color reference, I know this is sometimes one of the biggest challenges in creating art from a reference is to match the colors that you see. How on earth do you do that? Okay, so let's begin at the foundation of this. So for this wafer part of the painting, if we look at it, we can sort of see, okay, we do have a bit of a yellow, orangey, browny, kind of biscuity kind of vibe going. So how do you make color look like this? Because you could use a pure pigment, but end up having something that's either too orange or too yellow. And that looks funny because that's not what a wafer cone looks like, right? It's that really beautifully baked biscuit kind of color. So let me show you what I've used. I've got here a cadmium yellow medium. I started with that. Now that's way too yellow. Then I've also added some yellow ochre to dull that down a little bit, but still keeping it in the yellow family. It's still too yellow, but I also want to warm it up slightly. There's a definite orangey kind of vibe to this. So I added a red orange, which I think is this one. Now, this is a code 014. So I must go look what exactly this color is called so that I can help you in the right direction. But it's definitely more orange than red, okay? So I've just called it a red orange. Then we've got a nice warm color, but it's too intense. We need to tone it down. And instead of just adding gray to it, the best way to tone down a color, to mute it a bit, to give you a little bit more of a natural vibe, is to use the opposite on the color wheel. Now, if I grab my color wheel and we look at all of the yellows and oranges that we've already added, we need to now basically go to the opposite of the color wheel. We need some blues here, especially for this yellow oranges. So I see here a blue violet, and your ultramarine blue, which is this one in my palette, just so that you can identify it when I mix it, is my ultramarine blue. And that will tone down the oranges and some of the yellows. But I also added a drop of violet, which helps me to neutralize the intensity of the yellow. And then I'm going to share a big secret with you. I've added titanium white gouache. We'll get into that contradiction right now. So the combination of these 6 colors gave me this beautiful biscuit color. Now, if I hold my reference material, you can even fold it. closer to that, you can see that this translates. We have something that would communicate that beautiful biscuit color for us. Right. So let's look at some of the shadows that we have here in the ice cream. And we've got a beautiful neutral kind of gray, but still towards the warmer side. It's not too cold. So I started with a Paynes Grey, which is over here in my palette. I've used a yellow ochre. I've used my Ultramarine Blue, and I've also used raw Sienna. And I've also added a little bit of titanium white gouache. I see now I didn't circle this little block. Okay. And all of these 5 colors combined gave me this beautiful neutral color, as you can see on the video here. All right. So now let's look at some of these warmer glow areas inside of the ice cream that really just makes it look so delicious and yummy. So I started that beautiful rich color that I see there. It's not just a pure orange or a pure yellow. I've started again with yellow ochre. I've got some cadmium orange here, and again that red orange, and again some white titanium gouache. The combination of these 4 colors gave me this beautiful, rich ice cream glow kind of color. And again, if I hold them close to each other, we can see how that translates. And then last but not least, I'm looking at this background. It's not just gray, it's not just brown. It's almost like a khaki kind of color. There's a definite green sort of hue to it. So I started to mix that color by using my Paynes Grey, my emerald green, and my burnt sienna. So the 3 combines into a beautiful neutral color, and I'm going to play on the translucency of the watercolor to give me this beautiful background. And then you will also see on the video, I'm just sort of mixing 2 colors together. If I look at some of these sections here in the ice cream, there's a definite green sort of repetition of the background color present in the ice cream. So you will see that slight greenish color that I've got there, and that comes from this emerald green that I've also used. So I've just sort of played on a mix in the swirl of ice cream by using a bit of the shadow color and a little bit of this ice cream color over here. I will talk about that now. And inside I've used some white titanium gouache to bring the 2 together for a smooth transition. So I think it's sometimes nice to just practice how these colors are going to come together on a separate piece of paper before we get into the actual painting. And now looking at the lighter side of the ice creams, I started with titanium white gouache. And then I've added a lemon yellow, which has got a definite green bias to it. I've added a little bit of emerald green, and I've deepened it with a touch of Paynes Grey. And the combination of these 4 colors gave me this sort of ice creamy kind of vibe that I see on this reference material. Now, let's quickly talk a little bit about why am I using white gouache? Now, there are 2 schools of approach in watercolor. You've got the European kind of approach to watercolor, which is the general consensus out there, that you must use the white of your paper in order to preserve some of the white, okay? And you start with the white of the paper for the lightest areas, and then obviously you add watercolor for the darker areas. And that gives you a contrast value difference that sort of reads then as white in the ice cream. So this is why I chose this reference material, because I want to show you guys that both the white of the paper as well as your color choices can help you communicate this white of the ice cream. Okay, because how do we paint white on white and have it read as ice cream? That's the whole challenge. Now, the second school in watercolor is more the Asian school, and they absolutely adore using a white gouache or a Chinese white to add an opaque layer on top of another color in order to make it look lighter, or to add your titanium white gouache to colors to give you beautiful muted soft pastel tones. Now you can buy watercolor that's pre-mixed in beautiful pastel tones for you, and if you see that there's a PW6 pigment in your watercolor, they've already basically added titanium white to your pigment on your behalf. That's going to give you those creamy colors. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with using a white titanium gouache or a Chinese white in your watercolor, because there is a place for that depending on the artwork, right? So I'm one of those coaches that believe that you use the tools that's available to you, and that's going to help you to communicate what you want to create on your paper, rather than strict rules that is meant to be broken. So I'm going to challenge you today. So it helps to understand the medium and to understand that it's a translucent medium and that you are going to build up on your depth as we go. That is an absolute principle in watercolor, but it does not mean that you can create beautiful creamy notes with a white gouache. And if you've gone too dark, you can always save your painting by using your white gouache to lighten up areas again and bring some bright highlights back into the whole experience. Right. The second secret that I'm going to share with you today in the success of this painting is the use of a background. If you use a beautiful background like they did here, all of your highlights are naturally going to sparkle already because you've got a muted background. So it's giving us a bit of a contrast between the white of the ice cream and a diffused background. So that is what we're going to do today. We're going to mix enough color in order to paint the background and to bring in the shadow of our ice cream. And when we've established that, then we've already isolated the ice cream from the background, and you will see that it will already stand forward because we're going to push the background back and cool it down with those hints of gray and emerald green. So let's go ahead and mix these beautiful colors. I'm just going to put my reference material over here so I can have a look at it and you guys can sort of see my mixtures here. And I'm going to put my color wheel here. Let's take a sip of tea. Cheers, you guys. It's a beautiful Sunday morning here. We have a bit of a long weekend. And yesterday I just took the time to just rest a little bit. And today I'm excited to get into this tutorial. Right. I'm going to use my quill brush, if I can find it. It always tends to sort of slide into the other brushes. There we go. And the reason why I prefer my quill brush to these synthetic ones is it just holds a lot more water. This is definitely a little bit more absorbent. And I want to be able to really spread this wash. But I'm going to use my synthetic brush to mix the color because it just helps me to stimulate my pigment here. Now, before you start, a good tip would just be to just mist your pigment with a bit of water and just allow that to just begin to activate the pigment so that when we need it, it is ready to give. The next tip I'm going to give you guys before we get started, I'm just going to use my kitchen towel roll here. Let me just make sure I've got paper to paint with. And I'm just going to put this into or behind my pad just to give it a little bit of an inclination. That's going to help me to control the bead of water as I paint the background so that it doesn't flow all over the page. And it really helps you to create a beautiful matte and smooth background, working from the top to the bottom. But mix all your color, have it ready to roll. So I'm going to just first take this out. I'm going to put it in before we start so that I can show you guys how to mix the color here first. Right. So our background color that I've created yesterday, we start off with Paynes Grey, Emerald Green and Burnt Sienna. So I've got 2 buckets of water. One on the right is for rinsing and the one on the left is with clean water so that I can create a nice puddle. Now we are going to need enough. So I'm going to add a whole squirt of water there. That's where I mixed my background color, and let's get that pigment activated that was in there. Right. There we go. Okay, so let's start. We have a Paynes Grey. Let's really stir that in. Okay, and then we're going to add a little bit of emerald green to give it a nice ashy kind of background and vibe. And then we're going to add some burnt sienna to just warm that up a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, looking at that, that feels just about right. So I'm going to take my tissue and I'm just going to give myself a color test. I feel it's too light compared to my sample here. So we can go ahead and add a little bit more Paynes Grey. When a puddle of color that you've mixed like this will appear much darker to the eye than what it actually is when you paint it. So that's why we always swatch it before we begin painting, because you don't want to do color alterations to your mixture while you're applying it as a wash to your painting. I've just added a bit more burnt sienna, maybe a little bit more. Okay, that's starting to look nice. Let's add a bit more emerald green. Now there's no titanium white in this mixture because that feels good. Maybe a bit more burnt sienna. Yes, that feels nice. Okay, so now that I've got my mixture ready, I'm just going to squeeze out all that color, rinse that brush. I'm going to come in with my dry brush here and roll it in my mixed color to really soak it up and get ready for this background. Now you could start your background with water first, but if you're going to do a wet on wet wash and you're going to carefully wet it around the ice cream, you will have a foundation to let it flow into if that's what you want to try. But it might be much lighter in the end result then, so you have to make your color a little bit darker still to compensate for the layer of water that you'll have on your paper. So that's one approach that you could have. I want to challenge you guys to try a wet on dry, like I'm going to show to you now, and just breathe and just allow yourself the experience. Now before we can start, luckily I forgot. I want to mix this shadow color. Now the shadow color is over here, but I also need it to be a little bit deeper than the shadow we have inside of the ice cream, right? And yesterday I mixed my shadow color in this area over here. So let's start the shadow color. We need some Paynes Grey. We need some yellow ochre. I'm going to add a bit more. There we go. Then we cool it down with a little bit of ultramarine blue. Maybe a bit more. Okay, and then we're going to add some raw sienna to warm that up a bit again. I don't want cold shadows. They are cool, but they're not that cold. Okay, so now looking at this, I need to just get back into the grey a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more ultramarine. There we go. And now we're going to add white titanium gouache, and it's this one over here. Look at that magic. The gouache is now going to make this a little bit more opaque. That feels really beautiful. Let's see. Yes, it's definitely going to be a little bit darker than that. So that's going to give us a beautiful shadow color over here. Right, so our mixtures is ready to roll. So now that we've got our board at an inclination, and it doesn't have to be 90 degrees, just like 30 degrees or 45 degrees at most. And we're going to start at the top and we're going to work our way down. Now, when you do a wash like this, you don't have to rush, because you can really give your brush the time to soak that paper and work around your ice cream. So this is also where it helps to just have your drawing ready to roll. Now you can see how the bead of water is starting to form. Concentrating to work on both sides of the ice cream at the same time. And because the bead of water always collects at the bottom of your wash, it's always ready to be moved down further. But it gives you the time to just connect with your painting. Trying to be very neat around my ice cream. And look, if your wash is too light, you can always come back to it and do it another time. But I think we're going to nail it. We'll have to see, because watercolor always dries a little bit lighter. So where you have to really be mindful, you can just ride on the toe of your brush, and when you get back into the field around it, you can use the belly of your brush a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully go around my ice cream. Can you see why it's important to mix enough color in your little well here? Because you don't want to stop halfway to begin to mix more color again. Now there's a hair. Let's pick up that hair because the watercolor will accumulate around it. It's okay. Beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and use the color all the way to the bottom. And we have a successful background wash. Don't fiddle too much with it. Here we go. Right. Now be mindful that this area is very wet still. So I might white it just a little bit. And now that I've done my wash in the background, and I'm just making sure I've got it nicely covered all the way to the edge. Don't go back to the top because the top has already started to dry. So if you're going to introduce more water now at the top, you're going to create blooms. And we want a nice matte finish to our background. Okay? Okay. Don't fiddle too much. I'm going to take out my support there. There's not like a sea or an ocean of water on my paper, but you can see it is nice and shiny. And I'm just waiting for a time to introduce the shadow color when it's not that wet anymore. Almost like you're waiting for a velvety stage. It's not bright and shiny anymore, but it's also not dull and flat. Think of a velvety shine. And this is the part where you have to be patient. But in the meantime, I'm going to just mix my color again, because your titanium white gouache can be a little bit of a heavier pigment. So it's important to just get your mix ready to roll. And I'm not going to add too much water to my brush because I don't want it to pool away. I feel that we are getting to that stage. So just looking at my sort of reference, it's definitely from the underneath of my ice cream. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about this shadow. I think that is enough. Rinsing my brush and just taking off most of the water. I just want to blend that out a little bit. That's always... Oh, listen to the birds outside. That's beautiful. Okay. I think it's a good time to just leave it alone. Don't fiddle with it much more. I'm going to allow this to dry, and when it's dry we can come back and we can reassess our shadow and everything. I think it's a good place. We'll have to see when it's dry. So that's basically all you have to do for this episode, is just look at your color mixtures. Try that on the side first to sort of just familiarize yourself with the mixes and the colors, and then go ahead and do a nice background wash and introduce a little bit of a shadow, and we'll take it from there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye bye for now.